Weekend Teams, December 27th. Christmas is come and gone, and Craig and I are very excited to bring you the 12 Gifts of Teams. Most of the new features that affect end users, and some of the old but true ones that really make an end user's day that much better. Anything we missed, let us know in the comments. Go get a drink before we start?
No, I'm good. But we're already started. We're recording now.
Yes, and I'm not sharing my screen, right?
Yes.
Man, what a week. So this is the second time we've recorded this episode, and the last time I mean we recorded it. It was kind of funky, but we recorded it, and it was ready to go for Christmas. And I went to do the editing, and I just had a giant screen, like, of nothing, like, not of anything of value, just literally my background. I was sharing it, and when you record in Teams, that gets the priority.
Yes.
So what happened? Like, what was I?
Well, you went to show me something, and then you never switched back. And I'm looking at it, I'm going, well, maybe it's going to just record him because I don't know how Teams works.
It's only our jobs.
and mostly I was looking at like the show notes to make sure that we kept on, right? So that was covering most of the screen, and you were down there a little. I could see you, so who knows?
Well, I'll tell you what, man. We don't know Microsoft Teams.
No.
that was a disaster. But here we are.
I'm hoping to move off Microsoft Teams.
Today is December 27th, and we're recording our post-Christmas episode. Where we cover the 12 gifts of Teams, mostly from this year. Some really great things that came out in 2020, but of course some of the basics as well, to make sure we really, like, from an end user perspective, mostly, what are the 12 most important features of Teams, I guess.
Yes.
So you want to kick us off?
That's not really what we're going to talk about. So isn't
it what we talk about?
Well, it's the 12 categories, because there's a boatload of features that we're going to cover. All
right. Well,
but I will kick us off with number 12, Teams enabled devices. I don't know what that actually means. No. So Teams enabled devices. So these are devices that are certified to work with Teams, right?
Right.
So it's like microphones and cameras and stuff.
Yeah, and like we talked about in the last episode there, the key here is these are devices that, because they're Teams enabled, they're Teams certified, you get a bunch of specific things like frame rates and audio quality features. But I think my favorite part about that is the fact that you get the guarantee that there is the ability for firmware updates. So yes, as Microsoft Teams capabilities expand, the hardware manufacturer can send updates out, and if it's a software-based update, they can update the hardware so that it better matches Microsoft Teams capabilities.
Yes, and that's important because, well, everything gets updated all the time now. It's not like, 5 to 10 years ago where you got to patch every 3 years or patches every month or something like that. So important to have the latest and greatest in both the software and the hardware and all that good stuff going on.
And with the Teams enabled devices, towards the latter half of the year, towards the last couple of months, they announced the Teams companion devices. So we saw the Lenovo device, and I think a couple of others that are more or less tablets, but specifically designed to work with Teams. So I would love to play with one, but at their current price range, it's out of my my wife acceptance factor list.
Amazing how that happens.
So, all right. So number 11, kind of going in that same vein, and it's interesting because it's gotten a lot of publicity, but in a year where almost everybody in the knowledge space is working from home, this concept of Teams rooms.
Yeah, so that's actually pretty cool. And that was something that was expected to have a lot of traction this year, but we expect going forward is the Teams room. So like the conference room set up with Teams enabled devices to be that full functioning conference room where we have the Microsoft Surface or similar type of device on the wall, big flat screen TV type of thing with touch capabilities where you can go up and run your team's meeting, be able to switch between devices like your laptop or the MT bar in the little console app that, or not console app, but the console, so that you can control who's coming in and scheduling them, and having different cameras, having different speakers. So having that fully Teams integrated conference room is something that should be very cool. And I've seen videos. I mean, I saw them like at Ignite and things like that, where they eventually will get to like almost holodeck experience, right? So I don't know how in the future that will be, but just so be able to sense where you are and maybe put to like a little image of somebody. I'm not calling for
Some
full
wishful
out
thinking on that
holodeck
one, man.
experience, but yeah, and I think you talked about a commercial you had seen.
Yeah, so there's a commercial going on, or not a commercial, but a application of a green screen, where in the sports world they had a broadcaster in a green room, and then they had four other broadcasters around a desk, and they were able to beam them in to be five people at the desk using the green room technology. So I mean, I can imagine where this technology is going. If you haven't had a chance to see a Teams room, I've been able to give over the last couple of years some workshops at the Microsoft Spaces, and the technology they have put in there, from the Surface Hubs to the drop mics to the ability to really get those mics synchronizing with the speaker phones, all of those capabilities, like I'm really excited to see what that looks like in a Teams room enabled workspace. So just who knows when we'll actually get to take advantage of it, right?
And I can't remember who I saw on Twitter, but there's a couple geeky people, right? Imagine that. Geeky people on Twitter who are setting up their own Teams rooms in their houses, right? So that they can have that experience just to practice with and, have that full experience. So
they don't have you doing that yet?
Well, I'm supposed to be able to do that. I've just not done it. I have the MTR. I have the device. I just haven't hooked it up. I've had a lot of things on my plate going by.
So speaking of working from home, the next two categories of features, numbers 10 and 9, calling features and video conferencing. From a calling features perspective, this is pretty cool. This is something that I've been taking advantage of in Microsoft Teams for a couple of years now, is the ability to have an actual phone number and use voice over IP technology to utilize in Teams instead of a desk phone.
Right.
And with that, if someone calls my phone number, it rings my desktop, it rings Teams on my mobile. The switching capability is really nice. There's been some really great features over the last year with call merging and or transcript enabled voicemail. Some really cool stuff there. Pairing with that, of course, the video conferencing side.
Yeah, some really nice features. Sorry. I got stuck with what I was going. Also, some network improvements. I assume that they work really well. One of the nice things about, or one of the interesting things about everybody working from home, right, is we don't have to worry about the network being able to support all the loads of if everybody in your office is. So that will be interesting to see if there gets some complaints when people move back to fully using Teams in an office setting where you have 1,000 people, and how the bandwidth can hold that. I know that we get asked a lot about doing network advisories and making sure that everything goes out. And we have some, when you're doing like team live meetings, which will come up later, how do you handle like hundreds of people or potentially thousands of people inside one building? Streaming all that video, and there's some ways that we go around routing that. Like you have a server that it all comes into the server, and then the server distributes it internally into the network so that we can not take down your entire network. So that's pretty cool.
That's very kind of you. On the video conferencing side, there are some really cool things that came out this year. Breakout rooms are huge in the education space, custom backgrounds like you can see Craig and I doing here. The together mode, which we just talked about last week, where we talk about whether or not there's value. And yeah, I think ultimately we both agree there's some social value,
right?
For selfies at least, yes. And then we talked about transcripts and voicemail, that the live captioning, especially when you've got when you're trying to include as many people as possible, the ability to provide live captioning is just fantastic.
So yeah, and what did I see? I had a company that was was loading it up early in the stream. Well, so they would do the video, they were going to do a live event, but they wanted to have translations available. So they actually made the video early, loaded it up in stream, and got a translation for it because they would load it up and say,
Oh,
hey, I
cool.
want to use Japanese, right? And then grab that transcript and pull it up. And then when they were doing the live meeting, they could distribute the translations to all of those. And that was the easiest way for them to do that. So that was actually kind of cool. I mentioned something to you that you had not heard of, but when you schedule a meeting, there's a place for you to add files to it. So kind of even when you do it in the chat, it loads it into that same folder or OneDrive file, so that's what I take advantage of, because I do a lot of workshops with some of my clients. I will upload the agenda and the exercise files and stuff ahead of time so that they have the ability to go in there and pull them out.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. And then, of course, very important feature for project managers, for teachers, the mute all except me option. So that you can make sure that if your group gets a little rowdy, you can bring them back down and get the conversation going in the right direction.
Yeah.
And if that's not, go ahead.
For me, the participant list is huge, right? Having that on the side. And now the ability to be able to download that afterwards.
Yeah. So you can see lots of stuff in the video conferencing, calling space, and eventually the Teams room space that are all really interrelated in trying to help organizations be more productive, whether you're in the same office or not.
We could have done 12 of just that. 12 steps of video conferencing. I know, 12-step program. Is that what we're doing? No.
Something like that. Yes.
Something like that.
So, which of course leads to, the next piece of that being Teams live meetings. So we just ran a conference for 1,000 registrants, about 500 attendees, and we mixed both Teams live meetings and regular Teams meetings, giving us the ability to have more than 300 users in a single event for your Teams live meeting, having that built-in Q&A, people being able to pause or rewind in a Teams live and because it's directly recorded into stream. Some really cool stuff there. And of course, which we don't use because we don't record with Teams live meetings, but the ability to connect to third-party production software and really do professional style broadcasts. These are very often used, I mentioned, at events. My office uses them for our monthly town halls. Some really great capabilities. And you can have something like, I want to say you can have more than 20 of these running concurrently in a tenant, if that's correct.
No, I thought it was 15, but.
Okay, is it 15? It's still,
it's a lot.
I can't imagine many scenarios where a single organization would break that number.
No, yeah, so it'd have to be a huge conference.
Yeah.
But no, really good stuff there. I think what I like best about live meetings is, as an organizer or a presenter in it, you have that meeting for those people. So you're really just dealing with like a normal Teams meeting as far as that goes, if I didn't know any better as being a presenter or an organizer. So I have my chat and I can chat with the people that I'm organizing with, and then we can have the Q&A as a managed chat. So as people ask questions from there, we can decide which ones we want to answer, which ones need to be set aside, which ones we want to advert privately, which ones we want to publicly answer. So those kind of things are really beneficial when you kind of do that. And then the ability to, publish what you're wanting to present and then have a queue for the next available item coming up. So really good way to manage stuff. And it works really well, and it goes up into the cloud and it kind of gets distributed that way, so
so it'll again be interesting to see what comes in the next 12 months with relation to this feature as well, as they're trying to get more and more organizations. For example, through 2020, Microsoft's own advice was, if you need to be able to track registrants to particular events or particular sessions, then you might want to consider using a different tool than Teams. But Microsoft doesn't like sending people to use other tools for very long. So I imagine we'll see a lot more from a marketing perspective, being able to track leads, etc. with tools like Teams Live and even Teams meetings in the near future.
Yeah, that should be. I think that's coming, but I haven't got the
So
official on that.
so that leads us to numbers 7 and 6, which I think when we recorded this last time we went out of order. 6 being the Office 365 integration across the Microsoft 365 platform, and 7 being apps, specifically third-party apps. Where you want to start, Craig?
Um, let's start with the Office 365 integration. So one of the big things that I tout about it is, you have the waffle there in Teams, and you have the ability to integrate with the Power Platform, which is huge, right? So
Yep.
has been the latest announcement, really. So bringing Power Apps into the studio, like a Power App Studio, right into Teams, so I can develop my apps, and with the Dataverse backend, I can have a little 2 gig database. I
Yep.
think I can have almost 1 million rows in that, right? So it doesn't have to be just using SharePoint as a back end of that. So I can do things a little bit more relational database ish when I'm doing that. We can also publish it a lot easier to a team. We can do things with. There's a flow. We're not flow. Sorry, I forgot what we're talking about. Power Automate. I can bring that in. There's a little IDE for that.
Yep.
And Power Virtual Assistants also coming in. So there's development right there, and then it integrates seamlessly well with OneDrive, SharePoint, Project. We've seen that, the ability to add tabs, bring in the first party apps. So that kind of brings in the apps in that, and then we have profiles from Azure Active Directory, which we can leverage pretty easily in Teams.
Yeah, and you mentioned integrating with SharePoint. So earlier in the year, they announced the ability for organizations to change the left navigation of your team, so you could actually push out with global policies, like a link to the intranet.
Yeah.
And then later in the year, they started to talk about additional SharePoint integration, which is good, because one of the conversations we have most regularly is, what is my information architecture, and how is it affected by the existence of Teams? Most people think about information architecture specifically relating to the navigation.
Right.
And it's really hard when you've got 10, 20, 50 teams that you're a member of trying to figure out that navigation. So the fact that Microsoft is starting to bring those features into Microsoft Teams, load SharePoint pages and other things, be able to change the left nav, I think those are some pretty big features that we'll see expanded as Microsoft tries to, integrate more.
Right. And then just talking
Um,
about apps and the third-party apps, I mean,
yeah,
I think they're up to over 300 now that integrate with them.
yep,
So really cool, some really cool things. Some of them are free, some of them require purchases, but or licensing there. So that gets a little bit tricky when you're trying to manage that.
yep.
But still some really cool integrations with some really cool stuff. And if you need it, like Jira or Salesforce or Twitter for marketing, any of those, they're, you just have to have them available and have your IT people sign off on them so that you can take them, publish them, pin them to the side rail. They work really nicely with Teams. So giving you that one place to access all your stuff.
And for our government customers, or our government listeners, that is, late December news that the ability to sideload apps in the GCC and GCC high environments, it has been released. And that's huge for organizations who don't want to have a third-party app store per se, but they do have apps that they've developed for their own processes that they want to be able to integrate. Sideloading lets you install those apps and push them out to your staff. So for organizations who sell to the government, like AvePoint, we're excited because we're finally able to push our tool out to those customers. And for organizations who develop a lot of things themselves, that capability to integrate through third-party apps, even if it's your own party, that's big. Another one that I'm interested to see more about over the next few months is this concept of Teams certified apps. There are not a lot of them. I know we're looking at the process right now, but Microsoft has recognized that the certification of applications makes it easier to use them, makes it easier to convince IT. So they have released a certification, and I'll be interested to see that expand more. I don't have a lot of details today, but I'll be interested to see that expand more over the next 6 to 12 months.
Cool. I will be interested in that as well. So.
All right. So going into our top 5 for the year, or top 5 gifts of teams, I suppose was what we've called this, is search filters. And I love talking about search filters. Whenever we're having tips and tricks for new hires or something like that, I'm always called upon to talk about this. So if you search in Teams, there's some things that you may have realized. It doesn't seem very intuitive. It searches across all messages or files or people, but not much else. So a couple of things worth noting is first, the fact that you can filter those. And the fact that when you filter, first thing you can do is in chats or activities, you can look for unread things. But also if let's say you're in a chat, or I'm sorry, if you do a search, you can actually filter by channel, by team, by who posted it, by a date range. So there's some really great capabilities in there. The thing I learned this month is, let's say you're in a chat, Craig and I know Craig and I have been talking for years in Microsoft Teams. It's hard to find something I'm looking for. If you've ever tried to scroll back over 6 to 12 months worth of chat, it's very hard to find something.
But if you scroll back over 2 to 3 days.
That's right. If you control F now within a chat, it searches within that chat, and it keeps the context there too. So it's really, we're just seeing a lot of capabilities of growth in these capabilities that I think is really cool.
Yeah, I would just like to see them highlight the chat a little more. I mean, they talk about it, but the filter, like, if you don't know it's there, I don't think that you see it. Like,
yeah,
when I point it out to people, they're like, "Oh, I didn't know that I could do that." It seems obvious once you find it because it's right in the upper left-hand corner. But the fact that you can actually click on things, I don't know why. To me, it's not been an obvious feature. So.
Yep. Well, and once people know that the symbol is a funnel, because you start with a lot and you filter it down, and it's not quite intuitive, but once people realize that's what it is, you're absolutely right. It becomes part of their daily practice. So pulling away from the end user perspective for a little bit, because most of what we're talking about really is focused on them. Craig, when we were doing this list, you really wanted to talk about Security and Compliance Center.
Yeah, I think it's one of the biggest features about Teams, and actually Office 365 or M365 in general, right? Because the good thing about Microsoft 365 is they give you the Security and Compliance Center. So one place shopping to kind of manage all of your security and compliance for the entire M365, which obviously includes Teams, which is one of the big things when people go to Teams is they're like, how do I secure it? How do I make sure we're compliant? So the effects, so we can have retention in there. We can manage retention. Similarly, I can't even talk today. So similarly to how we're already doing SharePoint, how we're already doing OneDrive, how we're already doing Exchange, we just need to add Teams to it, Teams chats and channel messages. And the same thing goes with data loss prevention, because those rules are very similar. We can look for what we call sensitive information types, social security numbers, passport numbers, driver's license numbers, financial information, credit card numbers. If there's not, it comes with like 88 different types of what we call sensitive information types. But if you don't have one that you like, you can create a dictionary. You can create one with a regular expression. You can create a keyword one. So there's ways to create sensitive information types. And then you can use those for DLP rules. You can use them for retention. You can use them for sensitivity labels. And then with the important things with the sensitive information or the sensitivity labeling, is it sensitivity? It's sensitivity label, right? Then I can start creating my teams and say, these need to be private. These can be public. And if they are private, then these should only have internal people in there, and I can classify them at different levels, similar to the Azure Information Protection labeling. So they work hand in hand, or can work hand in hand with that.
Now, I'll say on that, I appreciate what they've done. They've definitely enhanced by mixing sensitivity labels with Microsoft Teams and replacing the old classifications, which really didn't do anything. They've definitely enhanced the security profile for Teams. However, by tying it to the user rather than to a business purpose, I still think we're missing something here. So for example, what I mean by that is, Craig, if you are granted a policy that's different than what I'm granted, and we're both owners of a team, then we can set the sensitivity differently. It doesn't matter what the purpose of the workspace is. So I think if your organization is looking at sensitivity labels, they need to look at exactly how they're laid out. And if it's a single sensitivity label for all users, no problem. But the minute you start adding different policies for different types of people, you have to recognize that means there are now workarounds to your security, potential workarounds to your security policy.
I believe that you can set that up so at least there's an alert if it changed.
Yep.
So then
now the other thing that you talked about here is the informational boundaries. I thought this was pretty fascinating.
Yeah, informational boundaries are pretty cool. I've been getting asked about this a lot lately, but because we get some clients who are in the financial industry and they have traders, right? They have people who are working in the market and they're making trades on a daily basis, and they should not, according to the SEC and federal regulations, being in contact and working and sharing information with people like marketing or sales. So
Sure.
informational boundaries lets us really put up that wall, like between them, so that they can't go back and forth and share information. It almost treats them like they're external to the company or little subdivisions informationally within the tenant itself, so that those groups cannot talk. It has to be a two-way street. I can't just set it up and say, hey, the SEC people can't send it to marketing, but marketing can send to them. So that has been getting more and more traction from my clients. And then there's also been we just rolled out compliant communications or communication compliance. So basically we're scanning how people are communicating via email and chats to look for keywords like a dictionary word or bad words to kind of flag that earlier. Because a lot of the ways that you find that is through e-discovery or content searching afterwards. So somebody complains about, hey, Jay has been saying bad things in the chat in emails he sends to me. Yes. So then I go do a search and it pulls that up. But the compliance communication monitoring flags that, or we'll look at the emails and things going by for keywords, for bad words, and those kind of things. You can set up your own rules and it'll flag it and send a report when that is actually happening. It does take, depending on how you set it up, like a percentage of what's going through. So it doesn't look at every email, but it'll say like, let's grab 5% or so just to make sure. Or if I know, or if I've gotten some complaints that perhaps you are sending stuff, I can say, okay, let's monitor Jay's email for a little while and kind of catch that proactively. As like I said, the content searching or the e-discovery type of searches tend to be more retroactive, right? Somebody's complained about it. Now we got to search and see what's there. So they work hand in hand, but you can get a little bit notification earlier. So a lot of that is good stuff, like I said, it's all there in the Security and Compliance Center and can be set up pretty easily and all managed in one place, which is different. So where I see other customers having this issue, or not our customers, right, where other organizations complaining about it, they're using Dropbox, they're using Gmail, they're using Zoom, and they can't manage all of that in one place, or it's just a big pain. So.
Yeah, no, and so the key here for our end user listeners is there's a lot on the back end to make sure you are able to collaborate safely with the right people. And I'm really interested to see more about the informational boundaries. And that last thing you talked about, the compliant, what was that? The
compliance, communication compliance.
Yes.
That's what it's called.
So I'm interested to learn more about those two features in particular. But it's good to know that these controls are there to make sure that your organization can protect the data that you are working with. It's good for end users to know that those features are there, simply because they're going to affect the policies that allow you to use the tool. So if something isn't working the way you expect it to, it may be related to a policy, and knowing a little bit about that makes it a little bit easier to communicate to IT, to communicate to security, what you're trying to do and why, and how what they're doing is affecting that.
And that becomes really important as we move to the third gift of Teams, sharing with external users.
So we're in the home stretch. Our last three, sharing with external users. There are three ways. We've talked about this before, but I feel like it's so important to understand. So first of all, you're working in your tenant. You've got your coworkers, your project members, your department team members,
Right.
and you want to share with Bob from your vendor. And the way you do that is threefold. If you want to message with them, you might do something called external access. This is your traditional federation.
Right.
There are whitelists which say only these domains can be have external access. There are blacklists which say these domains cannot have external access. So it's everybody but these. And then there's just open federation where anybody in Office 365 that is in your Azure Active Directory capability, so commercial and then GCC high, etc., then they can look for each other. And it's fantastic. One of my favorite stories of the year was one of my account reps who I said, how are you getting this information that you're sharing with me? The screenshots look like they're from Teams, but you're talking with one of our customers. And he said, oh, I haven't sent them an email in 12 months. I'm like, what are you talking about? They were whitelisted. He was able to communicate with this customer live using external access. So that's the number one, the first option. The second option is guest access. This is when you let somebody into your home. You give them you kind of give them a key. They can come into your teams, the teams that they're allowed. So the key only works in certain rooms, that kind of thing. So basically, they can collaborate in your team and in any other team they're invited to. And this is what most people think of when they think of external sharing is bringing someone in, sharing documents, etc. The gotcha to me is the third way, which is the SharePoint external sharing via SharePoint. And this is one people don't think about. This is the one that's been around for years within SharePoint, but it kind of gives you a backdoor to share. If Teams guest access is turned off, but your organization hasn't locked down SharePoint sharing, then you have that backdoor capability. It is not recommended to do this, but it's important for people to know that it's there, because if you do share something externally, then people in your team may not recognize that something has shared with people outside your organization. And this is a prime way you could have serious data spills.
Yeah, I usually see it the other way around. They share so they'll turn on guest access and let you share with it, but forget to turn on external sharing with SharePoint or OneDrive. And then people are like, I can't share a file. Why can't I share a file with the people in my team? Because that's in. And then the other important thing to know, so we're talking a little bit about admin rights, is for guest access, if you want to allow list or blacklist for that, that is outside of Teams, and that's actually maintained in Azure Active Directory. So, external access, I can do that right in the Teams admin center. They're moving that for guest access into the Teams administration center, but it's kind of hidden, and you have to go through a little bit of a hunt and find. If you don't know where it's at, it would be hard to find.
So that's sharing. There are those three ways. I'll share. I wrote an article about this earlier in the year. Not a lot has changed. The one thing that I think is changing is the integration between external sharing in SharePoint and guest access in Teams. I think we're going to see more and more connectivity is not the word I'm looking for, but integration between those, so that it is less more dummy proof, I guess is the way I would phrase it.
Yeah.
So in our last two, I think this goes very much to the basics of Teams. I don't think we're going to talk about much that is 2020. This is what does Teams give you, and my favorite here is the collaboration across organizations, but specifically on documents and getting files out of email.
Yes.
I remember two things from my consulting days. One is people would install tools in Outlook to capture your email when you sent it and save the file to your SharePoint, but with no metadata, no information about, just move the file there, which it was a first step in co-authoring. It was a first step in making sure that files are shared in the right way,
Right.
but it really was a miss. And I think the fact that not only can you do co-authoring in teams, have your information organized based on the team, based on the channel, etc., but then in Outlook, when you go to send an email, you can attach a file that you've been working on in Office 365, working on in SharePoint or OneDrive, and and when you attach it, it pops up that informational boundary of saying, hey, do you want to attach the file or a link to the file? Which, again, this isn't necessarily Teams function, but the back end of SharePoint Online and
Yes.
the use of Teams has really enabled these capabilities.
Nice. I'll agree with that. So yeah.
Oh, and the other story from my consulting days was with regard to this book boss concept. So we used to write a lot of proposals, and you'd have 3 to 6 weeks to write this proposal, and I'd say 5 or 6 business days spread out across the proposal writing period were specifically designed so that a book boss could receive the 20 different iterations of edits and combine them so that they could then send them out and get 20 new edits. Like the co-authoring has really saved what that looks like. And the fact that now you can see not only what has someone edited, but where is their cursor right now and live watch them type. Like, it's really cool.
Yeah, nothing like the old days when you used to go in and see project proposal underscore JL V1, V2, V3 and then CJ21 V2, V3.
My favorite was final underscore JL underscore the date underscore final number 2. I'm like, guys, this isn't working.
That was where naming conventions were important. And they still are, but we'll talk about those in another day. Well, that leaves us with the final gift of Teams, and I think that kind of wraps into the co-authoring and being able to do that, but discussions. So the ability to actually have a team and have one place for all that discussion to go on, whether it's in a channel, but keeping that organizational knowledge. So as people come in and out of your team, they can go back and look to see what's been talked about. It's threaded. Now it's threaded. It didn't necessarily used to be that way. So I could respond to a specific thread before it just kind of was all as you put it in there. We have the ability to just type what we want to type, or we can click on the little A button with the underscore on it, I believe, and it pops it up. So I can add a title to it. I can format it much like Word. So we have all that kind of rich text editing. Everybody loves GIFs and Giphies and stickers and embedding images. I think that's all cool. And the @mentioning. So if I specifically want you to look at something, I can @mention you. If I need everybody in the team to look at it, I can do the whole @general. I can do the @team. So that's great. And for me, that's really important because I'm in so many teams that I can't manage them. So if somebody does an @me so it shows up in that activity part, I am not going to find that for days, right? I may eventually wander into the team, but I had to tell my boss that. I had to tell my boss, look, if you want me to answer something, you got to @me or you got to @ our team. But I am too busy with my clients to just go back through our channel and see if there's anything there. And then I think
I was just going to say, allow me to beg for just a second on proper etiquette of Teams. Use the subject lines and make your conversations threaded in your channels. For my sales teams, every conversation has to have a subject, and our naming convention, speaking of naming conventions, is if it's an opportunity related conversation, name the subject of the thread the same as the opportunity name in CRM. So have some conscious thought as to how you use this, and provide that education out. And like you said, the @mentions. My senior leadership team has been very straightforward. If you don't @mention us, we don't know the conversation happened, and that's fine. But if you need us, you have to @mention us. So consider those capabilities from a team's etiquette perspective. And if you're an administrator, let me also implore you, leave Giphies and stickers on. They're a silly way for people to express their personality and their emotion when words don't always do it. Don't remove them. please? There's no reason to remove them.
I haven't seen a lot of people do that. I mean, the people that I have seen to do it, they also delete the chats after one day. So
yes. Which, okay, I get it. There are industries where this makes sense, but the power of Teams is not doing that.
Yeah, so. No, I get it. I really discourage against it, but there are at most I say just create like certain teams that you can't do that, but or groups. Put people in groups, but don't do it for your entire organization. And then the last part, I guess, one of the last things that came out this year, which was
so
huge,
the partridge
private
and the
channels.
pear tree, you're saying?
What?
I said so you're saying the partridge and the pear tree is private channels?
Yes, partridge and the pear tree is private channels. And what's really important about private channels is being able to take that subgroup that we have. So if we have a project working and only, we have some financial information about the project that only the project managers and maybe the business analysts need to know about, we can put that into a channel and they can have those chats all day without having to start up a new team, right? And then the rest of the team, like the worker bees, don't really care about that. And what doesn't get talked about often with that is when that first came out, it was just kind of out there. You had teams, private channels, but really no control over them as far as data loss prevention or e-discovery, but that has been since fixed, and retention. So, or like I said, originally when those were launched, you could do retention, you could do data loss prevention, and you could do e-discovery in Teams, but if it was in a private channel, that's kind of in its no man's land. But we've been able to catch up on that and make all of those features available in private channels. So now going back to user doesn't need to know how it works, but they need to know that it can be, your data is secure and all that good stuff that goes along with it.
Yep. So with that, we give you the 12 gifts of Teams categories.
Yeah, don't say that. So excited.
The Teams enabled devices, Teams rooms, calling features, video conferencings, Teams live meetings, Office 365 integration, apps, search filters, security and compliance center, sharing with external users, collaboration, and of course, discussions. I'm curious if you're listening to this and you're just shaking your head going, man, they really should have talked about X, Y, or Z. Tell us, shoot us a message, hit us up on Twitter, put it in the comments on YouTube. Let us know what we missed.
Subscribe to the channel while you're there.
Yeah, absolutely. Whether or not you want to hear more from us, subscribe to the channel, because we're lonely and want more subscribers, frankly.
And I'll close with saying I did see Jeff Tepper, the godfather of SharePoint and the owner of Teams as far as Microsoft's concerned, put out a tweet today that they were working on some exciting stuff for both OneDrive and Teams to come up in 2021 that he's excited about. I don't know what that means, but he's excited about it. When Jeff's excited about it, that's all you need to know.
Then we are forcibly excited about it. Craig, It's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed kicking this off with you in 2020, and I hope our dozen or so listeners have also enjoyed it. And cheers to a successful 2021, my friend. Oh, hey, look at that. You can't even see my glass in there. That's beautiful.
Yeah, I don't have one. I'll pretend.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you do. No, I saw this right there.
Well, look forward to seeing you in the new year, whenever that might be. Thursday? Thursday, Friday.